All right. Hey, guys, I am here for another YouTube small group, and we got our buddy James Oakes. You guys have met him before. He's come and spoken on a Wednesday night. He has been a leader at the infamous Elevate Weekend for a couple years, and you guys know he is the real deal, the bomb diggity. He's kind of crazy, but he's a pretty cool dude. But one thing that he does well and knows well is the topic of anxiety and depression. Uh, Mainly because he's lived through it, he knows it, he hasn't just read about it, and he's very open about that and wants to help people through that. So we're going to be talking with him about it, just kind of doing an interview with him. So James, how's your day going?
Man, it's going good. Just with everything, just doing schoolwork, getting ready, going through college, and just plugging away. So I mean, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, man. Don't you just love school?
That's a word for it. That's one way to describe it. It is something else.
Yeah. Now, when are you gonna shave your beard? I think that's a real question.
That is also a question that probably won't happen for a very long time. I depend on urges when it comes to shaving.
Yeah, you shave your head more than you shave your beard.
That's not true at all.
I don't know about
that. I've shaved my head one time, and I've shaved my beard multiple times.
Oh, so okay. Last question before we dive in: have you had the Popeyes chicken sandwich?
Oh yeah, so good.
Okay, so how does it fare to the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich?
I think they're very close. I do give the edge to Chick-fil-A. It's not because of quality, because I think quality-wise, I think Popeyes is better. But it's a lot easier to go to Chick-fil-A and chicken sandwich than it is to Popeyes, because the Popeyes by our place is like, it's 4 hours to get to that line. Chick-fil-A, it's 7 lines, and you're in there in 3 minutes.
Boom. Yeah.
And so
I'm telling you.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A takes the edge for me every time.
If we got whoever created the Chick-fil-A drive-through to run the country, man, we'd be golden.
I don't agree, man. We'd be solid.
Oh, so James, let's dive in. Can you help us understand like what are anxiety and depression, and how can we kind of differentiate between the two?
Yeah, so if we look at it this way, anxiety is like, it's kind of like just like the textbook definition essentially is like, it's a state of nervousness. Like, you're always dreading that something bad's going to happen. You're always expecting the worst and things like that. So like, a good analogy that I give people, because one of the things that I do, like my job right now is working with men who have mental and physical disabilities, and that includes anxiety and depression. And so one of the illustrations we always give people is anxiety is like, there's a wave, like you're watching the sea, and like this wave is building up, it keeps building, but it never really crashes. And so you're like always dreading that wave's going to hit you. And so you're always afraid, but the wave never comes. And so you're just always in that state of nervousness, and just without really a reason sometimes, but like, you're just nervous, freaking out and things like that. Depression, on the other hand, is like, it's a lot of people just describe it as like a state of like sadness, or if you look at old school, like 1800s or 1900 definition, early 1900s, like a state of melancholy is the word they use. I just like that word. I think it sounds cool. But with depression, like, it's a prolonged period of sadness, and it's a debilitating, like, it'll hinder you sometimes. Sometimes you can function through it, you can do things normally, but you have like a loss of appetite, so this is the weird thing about this, because like, you can have a loss of appetite, or you can have an increase in appetite. You can sleep too little, or you can sleep too much. Like, there's a lot of different signs of it, and it's unique to each person. And so I mean, the way it shows itself in people is different, but generally, I mean, it's extremes. Like, this extreme sadness. If that answers your question.
That's good, man. I like that. So anxiety, we could say, is a state of nervousness, and depression is a state of sadness, or if we want to go old school, melancholy, right?
Yeah.
And I love how you said it's a prolonged period. Like I know we all get sad, but that sadness should quell or end normally at a certain point of time. But it seems like the depression is like it's just never ending. It just doesn't stop, and you're like, okay, why is this continuing? And I guess that's the point where we're like, okay, something's wrong here, right?
Yeah, it's like if you were in a tunnel, and a lot of people, like, it was a short tunnel, and you're like, hey, like, this is sadness, is the tunnel, and you can go through it pretty quickly, and then there's a light at the tunnel. Depression would be like, I can't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if this will ever end. Is a lot of that's a lot of the feeling. It doubles down because you're sad, and also you don't know if you're ever not going to be sad again.
Wow, that's big. That's big. So James, tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you find out you were anxious or depressed?
I think I've always been a little, like, I mean, the more and more I look at it and stuff, because I'm very self-reflective, like, on the way I do things and things like that, which I think is a byproduct of anxiety. But one of the things is, like, in high school, for one, I chew my fingernails like crazy, and like it services itself, and like you can chew your fingernails, your cuticles, and things like that. That's a sign of anxiety. I've been doing that since like 4th grade. And so, yeah, and so we're just kind of like one of those things, like, it's always been there. But I'm also just been incredibly nervous about things that were never going to happen. Like, when I was a little kid, I'd be afraid about just like things happening in my family that were completely unrealistic. I thought quicksand would be a lot bigger deal than it is. That was one thing. I was like, be careful walking outside in the woods, guys. There's quicksand everywhere. And they're like, there's not an ounce of sand in our pasture, so I think we're fine. And so, like, it was just like, it'd be ridiculous stuff like that. But when I got older, so like tests and things like that, or I remember one time I had an anxiety attack because, and I thought it was a heart attack because I had I had an algebra test that day. It was like the finals, and I was like, I got so much anxiety that, like, I had chest pains because of it, and like I almost had to go to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. So anxiety has been a lot harder for me to like figure out and just kind of navigate. But depression, I think, has been a bigger issue because, like, in high school, I would go through periods where I would just hate everything. Like, one of the reasons why I am like this, like, I'm a big boy. One of the reasons I've gained weight and stuff is because of depression. Because, like I said earlier, it makes you it makes you eat. It'll make you, like, look for comfort in things that shouldn't provide you comfort. One of those, like, for me, was food. And so, like, it made me gain weight. And the bad thing about that is it feeds depression. And so, like, that was a lot easier for me to diagnose, because one of the things also that it does is it makes you not want to go do things. And so, like, I would wake up in the morning and I would be like, dude, I don't want to go do this. Like, I would miss church. I would miss school. I would bail on everyone. And I would just be like, I don't want to do this. And so, the way that I figured it out the most, like, because I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. And one day, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, just freaking out about something. And it had something to do with work related. And I called my mom and I was explaining it to her. And I was 22 at the time. And I called my mom and I was talking to her, like, the next morning. And I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. And that's, like, we talked about it. And he's like, brother, you got anxiety and depression. Like, we took a test. And we walked over, like, what was going on and just talked through it and stuff. And it was pretty much, yeah, it was like textbook anxiety and depression.
Wow. And I know that a lot of us probably have a similar story in the fact that we've been walking around with that stuff, but we haven't recognized it for what it is. Like, I know Maddie's dad found out one day that he had diabetes, but he'd been walking around with it for who knows how long. But finally one day, after kind of like you said, taking some certain tests and seeing the causes, they found out, oh wow, you've had this for a little while.
Yeah.
Now that we know you have it, we can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way, what about the youth, the students, if they're wondering the question like, okay, how do I know if I'm anxious or depressed?
This is the weird thing. I mean, with high school and stuff like that, it's anxiety. I think is a bigger picture than people make it. Just because of pressure, man. There's so much pressure on high schoolers today to perform well, to do like, 'cause you have ACT, you have SAT, you have college prep, you have picking the right college, picking the right degree in college, and all of these things. I think a lot of it is for students to diagnose, like to not to diagnose themselves, but to look at honestly themselves. I mean, first, just be honest with yourself. Like, are you struggling? A lot of times, what we do is we get really good at faking it, and what happens is everything falls apart around us, and we have nothing like left, and so we have to be like we're finally forced to be honest with ourselves. And so to prevent that, I mean, it's easier to be honest earlier and to talk to your parents, man. Be open with your parents and just explain to them, like, this is what's going on. I haven't been able to function. Like, I'm stressing out. Like, school is freaking me out. Extracurriculars, like whatever it is, like, this is really hurting me. And like, is it causing you a state of nervousness? Like, are you sad all the time? Like, do you enjoy what you used to enjoy? Like, it's a matter of just being transparent with yourself, because a lot of times you'll notice something that's off before anyone else does. Like, I mean, Patrick, you know how you function a lot better than I do. Like, even though we're really good friends, like, and I'll notice eventually, hopefully, but like a lot of times, unless you bring it up, I'm not gonna notice. And so I mean, it's the thing of just like, are you being authentic and just completely honest with yourself that you're having a hard time?
That's a lot easier said than done.
Oh,
But you're
absolutely.
right. You're right. That's, as much as it may hurt in the beginning, I guess, right? It's going to help you out in the end. I guess you could compare it to surgery, like the cut, the healing, everything hurts at first, but you're better off in the end, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
be
you're
honest
gonna
with
have a lot
yourself.
of hard conversations, but in the end, you're gonna feel a lot better.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, don't be afraid, students, to go through that initial process to get to the end. That's where you want to get. But I know a lot of us may not want to go through that initial process, so we can avoid it. And the anxiety and depression can just magnify, multiply, and just grow beyond what we can even, beyond what we can handle. But I guess the hope is we have a God who can handle it, right?
That's right.
Another question, let's ask this, is why do I feel like this? And I guess another way of asking it would be, how can I know as a teenager what contributes to my personal depression? Because I know, like you said, what contributes to your depression may be different than what contributes to mine. What would you say to that?
I mean, first of all, I'm not a therapist. Like, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. There are a lot of men that are a lot smarter at this than I am. But I would honestly, I would just say, man, you know yourself better than anyone else. I mean, if you think you have anxiety and depression, I would just honestly, I mean, just talk to your parents and just walk with it. I mean, one of the best things that we can do with ourselves is we can be honest with ourselves. We can look at ourselves, but also it helps talking to other people about it because they may have a perspective that's different than yours. Because while we're really good at knowing ourselves, we're also good at lying to ourselves. I mean, I was it 22 years essentially. I was lying to myself, saying I was fine, saying like I got nothing wrong with me, I'm good. And so like when it comes to what like your stressors are and things like that, a lot of times it just helps talking it through with people. Like, what makes you nervous? Like, is it large crowds? Is it being in front of people? Like, what is it that stirs up this feeling in front of you? Or like, what has happened that's given you like caused you to be depressed? Like, it's seeking the advice of a friend who you can trust. And with students, I mean, it almost has to start with parents. Like especially with like a situation like this, it's the conversation of like mom and dad, like I'm feeling depressed, like I'm not doing well, because they're the ones who can help you get a go to a therapist or anything like that. And I mean, I think a lot of it also has to do with the step of like, so one of our phrases that we use at work is to erase the stigma of mental health. And just like what that means is taking away the idea that only dumb or like only crazy people have mental health issues. That's not true. I mean, I have a brain. I have a mental health. Like I struggle with it. Everyone struggles with it. Especially right now, man, with everything that's going on. All of us have issues that we deal with. And so, I mean, it hurts to hear people say like, dude, only crazy people deal with depression. Only like you have to be nuts to deal with anxiety. Like that's patently not true. Like if you don't experience a little bit of depression, if you don't experience a little bit of anxiety, like what do you do? Like, you're just coasting. And so I mean, there's a normalcy of struggling with these things. But when it comes to looking at ourselves, I mean, a lot of times we just have to talk to people about it and just say, hey, like this is what I'm struggling with. Can you help me like figure it out? And sometimes it's a therapist that can do that, and they do. Like that's what they're paid to do, and they do a really good job usually.
Yeah. And with that, man, you said especially now. And I assume by that you mean kind of the whole COVID quarantine craziness of just 2020 with what killer hornets and quarantine and double hurricanes. Gosh, what else has gone down this year? A ton of stuff.
Too much.
Yeah, too much. We're going to be living in Jumanji soon. So how would you say, as a last question for this week, how has COVID-19 possibly multiplied or added to pre-existing anxiety and depression?
Oh my gosh, man. I mean, with COVID, I mean, you have the dread of getting COVID. Like, there's the uncertainty of like, this is a monster that we're not really sure how to handle. Like, I mean, and every time you turn on Facebook, you have questions of, does this method work? Does this vaccine work? Like, what are we dealing with? And so, I mean, like, if we use the wave analogy, you literally have a monster that's charging towards you, and you're kind of just waiting to get it. I mean, and then also fear. Fear of it is stoked with stay at home or don't stay at home, like all this stuff. And so, I mean, as far as building with anxiety, like I would be very surprised if almost everyone doesn't struggle with it at some point.
You're right. I mean, as I think a lot of people that have not struggled with anxiety and depression have definitely struggled with it through this time. I think it was just a few months ago they were experiencing shortages of a lot of the medication that is typically used for anxiety and depression because a lot more people have been diagnosed with it.
Yeah, I mean, well, and on top of that, I mean, you have like just with shortages because of COVID. I mean, you have meat shortages, you have toilet paper shortages, you have like everything is running out because people are home and they're quarantining, and so you have the fear of like, I mean, job loss and things like that, and it's just like, am I gonna be able to eat tonight? Like, am I gonna be able like to take care of myself? Because not because I don't have enough money, it's because I don't have the resources. And as Americans, like we've never had to struggle with that before. and this is it's a crazy fear that we finally we have to reckon with, of like, am I going to be able to handle, like, survive?
We don't want to have to reckon with that, but you're right. But, so, man, James, we appreciate you, man. I know that's only 5 questions. We're gonna have 4 or 5 more. We'll do another week next Sunday. So, James, we get to have you 2 weeks in a row, which I know you guys are pumped about, because James is I mean, he's kind of cool, I guess, but he's the real deal. We appreciate you, brother, and we will look forward to seeing you next week.
Sweet. I will see you guys next week. Sounds good.
All right. See you guys.
So, guys, that was awesome. We had James Oakes that we interviewed, and he is going to be back next week, because we only we really just scratched the surface on the whole idea and topic of anxiety and depression. So we really kind of dove into these questions, really seeing what it is and how we know that we have it, maybe identifying the fact that we have it when we didn't realize it. Next week is going to be more so like, okay, now that I know I have it, or I know a friend who has it, okay, how can I help them through it, or how can I navigate my way through it, right? And where does the Bible, where does medicine, where do all these things speak into that? So that's going to be more so next week. But parents and youth, I'm going to leave y'all with 3 discussion questions here for the end. One is, can you identify personal factors of anxiety or depression? 2, what might be contributing to those factors? Can you identify what might be making it worse? And how has COVID-19 affected your mental health? So you could ask those questions and get some discussion going, and hopefully there will be some fruitful things that come from that. Otherwise, tune in next week, guys, as James will be back, and we'll see what can we really do with all of this. I'll see y'all then.